This is the Mahindra Thar Roxx, aka the car that we would have probably named and we thought would be named the Mahindra Thar Armada or the Mahindra Armada, aka the Mahindra Thar 5-door. Now, on the off chance that you were not on the internet on India's 78th Independence Day, happy Independence Day by the way, you already know that there's a lot that's different with the Mahindra Thar Roxx, and it kind of links with why they've given it a different name altogether. Because initially, when we all knew that there would be a Mahindra Thar 5-door, we were expecting the same formula as the Mahindra Thar 3-door, just to be extended, given an added dose of practicality and family friendliness, and left at that, keeping the core hardcore off-road formula as is. But as we've discovered with this car, there's a lot that's changed, and it's triggered by something important, a realization that I think a lot of us had back when the Thar 3-door itself was launched. Yes, the Thar has been designed as a purpose-built off-roader, but most people who buy the Mahindra Thar, irrespective of the 5-door or the 3-door, are not buying it because they're really looking to go off-road all that much. It's the design and the style and what this basic body language represents to us as car buyers. Which is why this Thar Roxx, yes, it's capable, but it's also a lot more luxurious. Time to get into it. Now, upfront, the changes are interesting and in some cases just bring a straight out smile to my face, because what seems like the idea behind this design change upfront is that Mahindra knew that a lot of Thar owners were anyway going to modify what their car were looking like with the angry Jeep headlights, the different grille, all of that. So they figured, let's just give all the people what they want right from the factory. Although I still think people are going to find a way to modify all this stuff. I'm pretty sure Karol Bagh is ahead of the curve no matter what. But my most interesting and favorite bit of the front end is this grille. I like to call this the try and sue us now front grille, because I don't see this raising any kind of issues with Stellantis and anything to do with Jeep. And it works out to be, I think, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a 6-pack front grille. So you're getting that muscularness that everybody loves from the Thar, and also these little recesses that have been integrated underneath the bonnet that make it look like it's got those flared nostrils. Assisted in no small part by these LED projector headlights, along with these kind of controversial LED DRLs around the side. Let me know what you think about them. I think it makes the Thar Roxx a lot more easy to identify. Sorry, the Thar Roxx a lot more easy to identify when it's following you. But I think a full DRL would have probably looked a little bit better. Then into the fenders, you spot the indicators integrated right here. Lower down, you will spot the fog lights. Next to it is the front parking sensor. And while it's a little hard to tell this apart at first, if you get a head-on view of the Thar Roxx, you may have figured out that this thing is, in fact, a little bit wider. Now, I don't think that's so much down to the main bodywork itself, but because of how they've flared the wheel arches, these sides, that just makes the car look a lot more muscular. In my books, this side profile is the most important angle of the Thar Roxx for two reasons. One is where it displays its dimensions change compared to the 3-door, and second is the kind of design highlights that they've integrated right here along with the size change, just to make it look that added level more distinctive. Let's talk about the size first. So the overall length of the Thar Roxx compared to the Thar 3-door has gone up by about 443 millimeters. It's still shorter in length than the Scorpio, but yeah, definitely gives it a lot more road presence. And of that 443-ish millimeters, 400 is just down to the wheelbase. So yeah, the dimensions do make this car look a lot more intimidating, a lot more macho on the side profile itself. Although the height is not all that different, it's a slight increase compared to the 3-door, because you also have that upwards gentle, ever so gentle upward slope going towards the rear end. Interestingly, the approach and departure angles are not all that different compared to what you've seen with the Mahindra Thar 3-door. So it's about 42 degrees up front, around 36 degrees for the departure angle. And the ramp over angle is also decreased by just about 2 degrees. So it's not that massive a change, although there will definitely be some impact for this when it comes to the off-road capability of the Thar Roxx. Now let's talk about the design highlights. First of all, you do have these nice and chunky fenders around the wheels themselves. The wheels, now this design is sporty, it's definitely very distinctive, And definitely, I don't know how to explain this, but it looks like something Mahindra would offer as a wheel design choice. You also have a nice set of 19-inch alloy wheels and all-terrain tires 255/60 section. So definitely complements the overall stance of the car brilliantly. And because you have so much real estate to play with right here, it makes sure that you know that this is the Mahindra Thar Roxx, although the wing mirror just says Thar. And then lower down, you will see the step that makes access into the cabin itself a lot easier. And because you do have the old school theme, you of course do have these exposed door hinges, both for the front and the rear door. Now, one thing that people found a little bit interesting, controversial, some point of being disliked, is this, because you have a nice and clean line moving here, and all of a sudden you have this design element sloping downward to sort of communicate that this is the 5-door, although you would figure out from the doors themselves. But yeah, let me know what you think about this. For me, it's very interesting because it gives me an idea of what the Thar Roxx would look like without the roof. Imagine if this thing was offered with a convertible roof like the 3-door, and this portion was taken off. This gives you that open top California beach sort of mood. And I wonder if they're ever going to offer that somewhere down the line of this particular guy. It might just be like a roadster, complete open roof, not even a convertible. But yeah, definitely something that could be potentially offered at a later stage. And with the rear door, you'll find that while you do have a body colored door integrated handle right here, the one up front, it's unpainted, and this is with every single paint option. Looks a little bit interesting, but I think like it would make more sense if they just had this painted black or body colored as well. You also have some Easter eggs that have been planted over here. Say you want to go and visit the camels in Rajasthan, and once you're in Jaisalmer, might as well go dune bashing. Behind the Thar Roxx, the rear end is one of those angles where it will be not all that easy to tell it apart from the 3-door Thar, because you do have the same tailgate mounted spare tire. You also have dimensions that at first glance won't really give it away that this is the 5-door. But one point of distinction that you will notice is with the LED taillights themselves. The LED signature has changed ever so slightly, and you don't have this bit that you do have with the 3-door, and nor do you have the Mahindra Thar or Thar Roxx written in the middle. So that is one of your giveaways to tell you which one is the 3-door and which one is the 5-door. And like the 3-door, you have a massive glass area at the back. And while you will spot the rear wiper behind the spare tire, it's kind of hard to tell where's the rear washer. Well, obviously it's not like they've given you just a wiper and no washer. If you look up top over here in this little notch, that's where they've integrated the rear washer. Nice little bit of attention to detail. And since we are at the rear end, might as well show you what the boot space is like. So the opening is similar, it's a 2-step process. You do have to first pop this rear door open, pretty easy. And then you just raise the glass area at the back, and when you shut it again, it has to be followed in the same order, where this goes down first and then followed by the door. And there are 2 measurements that they've given to the actual available boot space. So it's 447 liters when you measure it up until the backrest. And if they measure it all the way up to the roof, not something that's advisable because obviously it affects your rearward visibility, that number goes up to just under 645 liters. And you can take a look here. We have the medium-sized suitcase. We have another medium-sized suitcase placed over here. You can get a full-size suitcase, although with the backrest at the reclined angle, it might be a little bit tricky, especially with these door edges right here. But definitely something that's going to make the Thar a package that's a lot more practical, especially when you want to go for those weekend road trips with the family. For me personally, when I'm talking about the Thar Roxx, the biggest highlight is not the fact that it's a 5-door, not the fact that it's a bigger car, not the fact that they're giving you a lot more features even, but it's just how it looks on the inside. The intent behind this interior is very clear, that it's going in a direction that's a lot more, let's call it fabulous compared to functional, like we've seen with the 3-door. So for most touch points that you go across in the cabin, you'll find that the plastic quality is decent, not rich entirely, but definitely something you'd be happy to spend years and years sitting in. Over here you have this fake carbon fiber finish around the AC vents themselves. Smooth finish plastics over here, nice set of toggles that you'll see for the AC console, along with a couple of switches for the ventilated seats or the drive modes and stuff like that. And interestingly, on the dash top, along the door pads, around the door armrest, you'll also see a very generous use of soft touch material. So in that way, when combined with this ivory and black interior, The Thar Roxx does in fact feel more premium than the Scorpio N, and it's not really falling short of the XUV 700 by that large a margin. So that's definitely saying something. Although you can argue that with these kind of rich and plush interiors, it can sort of affect the kind of off-road dirty usage that you'd want to have, because let's face it, it doesn't matter if the seats are leatherette, it doesn't matter if these are, nice looking plastic panels. White always stains. This stuff never ages well, and it doesn't take long for that to happen. So that is something you need to bear in mind when it comes to the upkeep of the interior of your Thar Roxx. Now let's get into the features list, because that is something that's also a major highlight with the Thar Roxx. So first of all, you have this new 10.25-inch infotainment screen. It does come with both wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Although at the time of recording this video, Apple CarPlay is not booting on this particular system. It's not been integrated just yet. Like we'd seen with multiple other Mahindras, Apple CarPlay is something that really comes into play once we start seeing the latter batch of vehicles starting to reach showrooms. The interface of the touchscreen itself is quite on point. It's relatively easy to get used to, but you do need to give it a little bit of time to run through all the menus and options that you have with the touchscreen itself. The resolution's good. The interface is very responsive. But in that regard, I'd just say that if you're looking for a more user-friendly interface, I'd say that Tata Motors has done a better job with the kind of infotainment systems that they are running. And supporting this, though, is an absolutely epic sounding 9-speaker Harman Kardon sound system. We've played it with podcasts, we've used multiple genres of music, and it's genuinely a very enjoyable experience to listen to music inside the Thar. And you have speakers all over the place, including this, the integration into the door armrest, where you'd door grab handle rather, which definitely makes the surround sound experience come together all that much better. In front of the driver, you will spot this 10.25-inch digital instrument cluster. And like you've seen with other Mahindras, you also have the option of seeing information like the navigation display. So if you're connected via Android Auto, you can have the Google Maps feed displayed over here as well. And aside from that, if you are going to be operating the ADAS functions, the settings for adaptive cruise control, lane assist, smart pilot assist, all of that information will be coming across right here, as will the display with the blind view monitoring system. So the Thar Roxx, it does come with a surround view camera, and that is something you can see a clearer view of over here. And while the resolution itself is reasonable, the problem is the same that we had seen with even the XUV, where the processing is not all that quick. So especially when you're driving, using the blind view monitor does become a little bit tricky, and this is on a clear day, so it can get trickier while using it at night. But all in all, this cabin has become a lot more feature-rich. It doesn't really leave you wanting for anything. And that includes a 6-way power adjustable driver seat. It also includes seat ventilation. You have drive modes if you get the rear wheel drive versions. And over here, while you do have a long list of features being added, small things really matter a lot, like the inclusion of a wireless phone charger that is flat, making it a little bit more usable on the move. And you also have Type-C USB chargers both at the front and the rear. And up front, you'll spot a 65-watt USB Type-C charger. And most importantly, once you look up, you have a panoramic sunroof, and how. It is huge. And while the Thar Roxx is a 5-seater car, this panoramic sunroof extends almost all the way into the boot as well. So yeah, definitely something that makes this car feel even bigger than it already is, not like it needed it. Now let's get into the practicality that you're going to be getting inside the cabin, and also what is the seating position like. So on the practicality front, it's not all that great. So you do have cup holders in between the front passengers. This little slot over here is empty because this is the rear wheel drive, but if you get the 4x4 version, this is where you have the transfer case lever being integrated, and where you have the wireless phone charger, you can put in your wallet and some small items like that, including keys. And honestly, the door pocket, if I can call it that, is laughably small, something that's adequate only for fitting in small water bottles. So that is definitely something that you'll need to keep in mind when it comes to the Thar Roxx's practicality up front. And that also extends into the small little storage area that you have underneath the front armrest. This thing, if it would have been a little bit larger, would just make a lot more sense when it comes to storing your sundry items. Now the driving position. This is one point that's a little bit disappointing for me, because like me, many of you may have looked at the Thar Roxx and figured that if you are someone who is both tall and of a hefty build, this would probably be the ideal car to match your personality. But when you do sit here with someone of my build, and I'm fully telling you, right, I'm 6'5", I'm fat, this is the exception, not the norm. But it feels like you are sitting in a sort of hemmed in area, so your legs can land up brushing towards the side, towards the door pad, and this is something that's true of both the driver's seat as well as the passenger seat. So while this is a large car, you're definitely not going to feel claustrophobic. The sense of space within where you are gets a little bit hemmed in, with me being the person in the driver's seat. But now that we have somebody who is 6 feet tall and of a fit build, you'll find that things change dramatically. So definitely for the average size Indian, this is going to be a large and spacious and roomy place to be sitting inside. And it does give you a nice little ego massage with the kind of commanding view that you have of the bonnet. Although take a little bit of time to set your judgment, because the wheel arches towards the side, those fenders that are flared, not all that easy to spot at first glance. So now anyway, Amey, who is 6 feet tall, has got oodles of headroom available. The seat support and comfort is also quite on point. The footwell itself with this automatic transmission is just about wide enough. It's comfortable, but when you move to a manual, I'm not sure if that is still going to be the case, because there's not really any space for them to play with to add a third pedal. And in addition to that, you'll also find that the center console has a little bit of a hump that just juts out, so it makes the resting position of your left leg a little bit awkward. But all in all, a great place to be in, a nice SUV experience that you're getting along with the premium experience of the Thar Roxx when you're sitting in the driver's seat. Is just that for especially or exceptionally tall people, honestly speaking, Mahindra could have made a world of difference if they just give the steering reach adjustment along with tilt. Right now, it's only adjustable for tilt. Now, before we get into what the rear seat space is like, there's one thing that we need to acknowledge, and that is the Thar Roxx may be a more modern and more tech-loaded SUV, but it still is very much an old-school SUV to get in and out of. And because the floor itself is quite high, even though the doors do open the full 90 degrees, using the side step, it's still a little bit tricky and slightly cumbersome to get into the back seat, and it's definitely not something that's especially old person friendly. So to state the obvious, of course, I cannot sit behind my own driving position, but Amey, who is 6 feet tall, behind his own driving position is quite comfortable, so he does have knee room to spare. It's a large place to be in with decent under-thigh support even with the seat themselves. There is absolute oodles of headroom available. And just to add that additional level of comfort, besides the center armrest, you also have recline adjustment for the middle row backrest. So definitely a lot more family-friendly place to be in with the Thar Roxx in comparison to the Thar 3-door. This is complemented by a small list of feature additions, including a USB Type-C charger at the rear. You also have rear AC vents along with a small little area to store your phone. And in the seat back pockets themselves, you also have phone holders integrated. So definitely making this cabin a lot more family-friendly to be in, apart from being a lot more premium as well.
Overall, the Thar Roxx's cabin isn't just a huge leap above the 3 doors. The combination of quality features and space can easily pull people away from compact SUVs offered at the same price, especially since safety features include 6 airbags, ESP, tire pressure monitoring, front and rear parking sensors, all-wheel disc brakes, hill hold and hill descent control, among others.
Okay, I'm going to start off the driving bit with the ride quality, because we had a long presentation in the morning about how they have tuned the entire frame as well as the suspension setup to make it a lot more easy to live with. But as we went over that speed breaker just now, it's pretty easy to tell that this is still very much an old school off-road SUV in that sense. So when you're climbing over these small things, when you're going over mild undulations, you can constantly feel some amount of this side-to-side tossing, a little bit of body roll. So it is notably better than the Thar 3-door, would you say that?
Yes, it is. Not notably, a lot better than the Thar.
Yeah.
It is very usable, but I wouldn't say it can replace, say, XV700.
Exactly.
Or a Creta.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it behaves like a typical body-on-frame SUV in the sense that the suspension setup is just that little bit stiff. So it is interesting as an experience. You might actually like it because it just feels kind of cool when you're at the helm of something like this. It just feels like the car has a lot more character. But that's not something that you can, just get used to. It's if you're adapting from a hatchback or a sedan or a subcompact SUV and you're thinking that because the Thar Roxx is now available, I can get something that's more family friendly. Yeah, this is a bit of behavior that you still have to get used to, but livable nonetheless, and definitely better than what we had seen with the Thar 3-door.
And as a family car, it is still, I would say, compromised. It is better, but it is not something that your family, if you get it in the family and say, hey, it's really comfortable, no, they'll say, no, it's not.
Yeah, so it'll be abuse friendly on the off chance that you're going to your farmhouse or you come across national highways that currently have got so many deviations and random patches where it just goes under construction with absolutely no notice. On those stretches, you can obviously feel confident to go in without having to brake or feel like the car's going to feel delicate or something like that. That's never going to happen. But at the same time, it is livable, it is comfortable enough, but it's not perfect as the everyday SUV.
I would say the ride is more than acceptable in the front seat.
Yeah.
You don't feel much of the side-to-side motion or the sudden jerks.
But now,
yeah,
this was a minor little dip in the highway that we took at 55 kilometers per hour, and you can feel like you're tough. So you can actually be launched up from the seat quite easily on these, at the rear especially. So yeah, that is something that wouldn't really happen if you were driving like, a Grand Vitara or a Kia Seltos or something like that, because again, that's a fundamental nature of the vehicle itself. But I think that's about the ride. We've got you a decent enough picture. I would say that Mahindra's done a good job of the noise insulation. The harshness that you will be hearing from the engine and sounds in general, they've been insulated reasonably well. And now before we get into the performance, there's one thing that's notable here is that you have a long range of options to choose from. It's still a 2-liter petrol as well as the 2.2-liter diesel, but there are different states of tune and it can get a little bit confusing. So the automatics, the diesel automatic makes about 370 Newton meters of torque, the petrol automatic makes 380 Newton meters of torque. Both of them make somewhere around 175 horsepower. If you get the petrol manual, that makes between 150 and 160 horsepower and 330 Newton meters of torque. If you get the diesel manual, that makes somewhere around 150 horsepower and 330 Newton meters of torque. And importantly, 4x4, while it is available, is not something you're going to get with the petrol, which you do get with the Thar 3-door petrol. So the 4x4 option right now is reserved for the diesel, at least in the case of the Thar Roxx.
No one is going to remember, just put a...
we put the graphic. I think the editor would have done that already. But based on our experience so far, it is similar in nature that it definitely has adequate punch. You're not going to be lacking for performance. So if you're looking for a car that can do your weekend duties, full load with the family, driving in the hilly areas, we saw that with the Thar 3-door, and because this is a larger car being accompanied with more power output and torque, it's definitely going to be an experience that you're going to enjoy when it comes to just feeling the oomph of driving, even though if that oomph also translates to the suspension at times. And simultaneously, the everyday usability is complemented by two things. One is the steering is just as light as we had it with the Thar 3-door, but it feels a little bit more involving to use here. It's not as vague as it was in the 3-door, and it is as light. So if you are someone who's looking to buy this car and might be feeling a little bit daunted by the size of it, it's not going to be a handful to drive around, although you need to give it a little bit of time to set your judgment from the driver's seat, because while you do have a nice and commanding view of the bonnet, the wheel arches are pretty much going to fall into your blind spot. So that's something you need to get into account when you're driving, and also something you need to get used to and just figure out, especially when you're driving around in crowded cities.
A little bit of a disclaimer. Me bouncing around in the back, it is also because of the road that we are driving on. So it's not normal to have roads like this.
Yeah.
Right. And talking about the engine, I think we know, right? Mahindra, they have one of the best engines in the business.
Definitely.
Petrol and diesel. So you can't really go wrong with either. Obviously, with the petrol, fuel efficiency might be an issue because there are a lot of people who comment about them getting 8 single-digit numbers.
100%. And see, I think that is something by design, that if you want that feeling of oomph while driving, you do have that. But especially with the petrol, it's not something that's going to be fuel efficient or something that's going to be very pocket friendly to operate on a daily basis. So that is something you kind of accept as the buy-in with the deal itself. Even with the diesel, it's not going to be stupendously fuel efficient, because again, this thing has the aerodynamics of a brick also. And on the transmissions, you have both 6-speed manual as well as 6-speed torque converter automatic transmission options. and they're smooth enough to use in everyday conditions, responsive enough, nothing exceptional about them. You don't get paddle shifters or anything like that, but I don't really see any application where you're not going to find this completely usable, and that includes driving in the city. Smooth enough even when you're going through crawling traffic, but bear in mind with the petrol rear wheel drive, then the petrol, because it doesn't get 4x4, you do have the option of these drive modes including zip and zoom mode. I would stick to zip as far as possible, which is the more easy to live with mode. In zoom, especially when you're driving at low speeds, the throttle response feels just a little bit snatchy and jerky, and that's something that will be more apparent to your passengers than it will be to you. And like we have seen with the Thar 3-door, the XUV, and even the Scorpio, none of these SUVs are tuned outright for fuel efficiency, especially if you get the petrols. That is one place where you're going to have to make one compromise, and the trade-off, of course, being that when you want performance, it's readily available. Alright, a quick note on what you can evidently see I'm testing out right now, the advanced driver assistance systems. Big hump, little bit of a jiggle there. Okay, it recognized the lane. So right now I've got adaptive cruise control engaged at about 45-50 kilometers per hour. Lane keep assist is also engaged, and it's able to read these not so perfectly defined lane markers. So it's able to not just get into a situation where it's finding there's a lane and giving you a warning at the lane end. It's actually doing a reasonably good job of keeping it lane dead center. But there will be situations where you'll have like random cars that are parked on the middle of the road, and where at that time the camera is recognizing the lane, but it didn't quite compute that there's a car there, so it didn't intervene, and I had to manually intervene at that point. So yeah, very much still in a position where these systems are assistance only. It's not something you can depend on entirely, which is reasonable, and it's honestly speaking quite difficult to get a system that's perfectly India friendly. And honestly, I think it's largely down to just how erratic our road conditions are. It's very difficult to perfect. So while this is something that's most definitely going to be usable and something that can reduce fatigue, especially on long distance drives, it's not a setup you can depend on 100% just yet, and it's kind of difficult to say when we'll get there. If you've watched this video up until this point, I think most of you already know what I think about the Mahindra Thar Roxx. Yes, it was a slightly controversial decision on Mahindra's part to go from the 3 to 5-door format and not just leave it at that. It's not as functional as the 3-door Thar is, which can be something that might irk a few purpose-built or hardcore off-road drivers. But I feel like largely that is the right decision that Mahindra has taken, because there's something about the form of these old school looking SUVs that matters more than off-road capability to a lot of people. And let's face it, it's not like they're asking you to compromise on the off-road capability either. So it's a more feature-rich package, it's a more family-friendly package. But that being said, I wouldn't still go so far as to say that this is the ideal car for family buyers and you're going to get the best of old worlds with an old school SUV that's also perfectly family-friendly. But importantly, while the Jimny 5-door and the Force Gurkha 5-doors are purpose-built off-roaders that just happen to be family cars, I don't think that applies with the Mahindra Thar Roxx. This is a lot more thoroughbred as a family-friendly, practical and premium SUV. And the terms and conditions that come with that deal, they're quite reasonable.